So welcome all, great to have you back for week 3 of the Ready to Roll Initiatives webinars. Before we get started, I just wanted to give you some information about the structure of these webinars. These webinars will be live the next 3 consecutive Wednesdays from 10:30 to 11:30 Eastern Standard Time. Next week's webinar will be Ask the Producers. After live broadcast, webinars will be archived on DC Camera's YouTube channel. We are also posting information about these webinars and the Zoom meetings on the Facebook pages of DC Camera, Surviving the DMV Film Shutdown, the Mid-Atlantic Studio Mechanics, and Series Script and Electric. So please check these sites for future information on the webinars and departmental Zoom meetings. We are also conducting the departmental Zoom meetings, which are also held on Wednesdays from 1:30 to 2:30 p.m. Zoom meetings are open discussions with departmental specific moderator. Today's Zoom meeting will be 1:30 p.m. with the Grip and Electric department, and Jenna Burchick will be moderating. Thank you, Jenna. You can find the link on DC Camera and Surviving the DMV Film Industry Shutdowns Facebook page. And next week's Zoom meeting will be with producers, coordinators, and PAs. But today's subject is how we did it. Our guests have been shooting commercials across the country and are equipped to share their experience regarding our new way of working. We are grateful to have these guests today. Amy Mayfield, a freelance producer and production manager based out of Philadelphia. She has worked in the TV and film world going on 20 years. Oh, here comes Moira. Hi.
Sorry. Morning.
Good morning.
Hey, Steve. Hey, Caprice. Good morning.
Hi. Good to have you. Thank you. So we're just going through Amy's little bio. So here, I'm going to pick it up here. So Amy's worked in the TV and film world going on 20 years. She just wrapped 2 back-to-back TV commercials in Pittsburgh. The first was directed by Jim Bartolomeo, and the second was directed by Matt Pitroff, and Steve Blair was the line producer. Both spots were with the same client. Moira Hurley has been a bi-coastal international production manager for 25 years. Her motto, the harder the job, the more I want it. We will ask her if that still applies after we chat with her about her experience PMing the first TV commercial shot in New York after the shutdown. Mo is joining us from Los Angeles, where she's prepping her next job. Kerry Craven served as line producer, production coordinator, APOC for a lot of commercials, documentaries, long format broadcasts from 1985 to 1995. After the birth of her son, she worked as an executive assistant for over 20 years in the sectors of commercial interior design, nonprofit foundations, and law. In 2017, she was instrumental in the start of a political action committee, Mad Dog PAC, with former White House staffer Claude Taylor. She worked as their logistics manager in advance of and through the 2018 midterm elections. Kerry currently serves as a corporate partner and line producer for American Dignity, a newly formed PAC centered and focused on researching, vetting, and producing accurately sourced documentary films with political messaging. Their first project, working title Hindsight 2020, has been in production and shooting since mid-May. The first shoot took place in Tel Aviv. Additional filming locations include Illinois, Ohio, Florida, and New York. Subjects include Congressman Joe Walsh, veteran David Weissman, and Ohio farmer Christopher Gibbs, as they share their stories of their 2016 support of the current administration, but are voicing why they have changed their minds for 2020. Kerry will have a lot to share regarding remote shooting. Thank you, ladies, and Steve. Hi, Patrick, for being part of this discussing and sharing your experience resuming filming after the shutdown. I want to start today's discussion with a line I heard the other day. COVID-19 is not proprietary. We are a tight-knit community here in the Mid-Atlantic, but I know in our industry, crew members are in line for the same jobs and local producers bid against each other, But during a global pandemic, we all have to look out for each other in order to keep us all healthy and working, which means we all need to be transparent and share information. I appreciate our guests' willingness to share what they have learned the past few months with us. So hi, Amy.
Hi.
Hi. I think everyone's going to be surprised to hear that your two jobs were actually live action and your crew size was between 34 to 45 people, 2 talent per scene, and you did have clients on the set. So your shoot wasn't at all remote.
No.
You were, oh, wait a minute. Go ahead.
We dove head first back in, so go ahead.
You were originally scheduled to shoot the end of March. COVID arrived, then the prep resumed, but adjustments had to be made on the creative. Could you please give us some background on that?
Yeah, on our first project, it was always scheduled to be a 2-day shoot, but we were scheduled to have up to 4 locations a day. Not a ton of talent was ever scheduled, but as we shut down and then tried to gear back up, we had to go through with the client and agency how to appropriately attack this. I mean, it could no longer have, 4 locations that were completely different with all these moves. We needed to trim back some scenes due to sensitivity for issues that have come up during COVID. So there was constant conversations almost every day, sometimes multiple times a day since March through June, the most conversations I've ever had about a job, just to try and figure out how we could all attack it, how we could still get the job accomplished and not just have a cancellation for it.
Right. So when you started hiring the crew, what new things did you do while booking the crew? And when we talked the other day, please speak about your booking email that you told me about, establishing your new COVID protocols, and your welcome document.
Yeah, I worked with Steve. It was an odd situation because I was producing the first job, but I was production managing for Steve. So we worked hand in hand for a lot of it. Developed an email that basically got emailed out to the crew a week before they were scheduled to start, saying this booking for the job is being offered upon these conditions, that you will be wearing a mask all times on set, that you'll be practicing proper hygiene, that you'll be following the safety protocols issued by the union, the safety protocols that both the production companies had in place for their specific needs, that we were going to constantly be keeping an open conversation, that this was a lot of people's first jobs. There was a lot of learning that we were all going to have to do. And we wanted to be aware of it, and we wanted to be able to adapt and change to it. So, there was rumors, I think, early on about trying to set up a way for anonymous reporting. So we figured out how to do that, how to get it instantaneously sent to 2 people on set so that if there was an issue, it could immediately be addressed if somebody didn't feel comfortable coming up to, to myself or the AD. I'd talked to other crew members that had started to go back to work on smaller, more TV style jobs that had already told me they felt like they were becoming the COVID police, and after 1 or 2 things they felt uncomfortable saying something. So that to me was the largest thing that we needed to put in place, was that comfort level that we are looking out for you. I don't want to get COVID, I don't want you to get COVID, right. But we all want to go back to work together. Then it was sourcing the PPE in a time of not being able to find PPE. So a couple of creative outlets, we were able to put together small bags for each crew member that included masks, included personal hand sanitizers, and then we did hand sanitizing stations around set. That initial email with all that information went out with enough time that we also said, if for any reason you can't make the shoot, whether it's COVID related or not, either replace yourself or tell us and we'll replace yourself. Like, there's no mark against you for having to call out of a job in a situation like this, or not being able to accept it because you're not even comfortable being back to work yet.
Mm-hmm. And some people are not ready to get back to work.
Yeah, I mean, tons of issues, kids, parents, families, you never know. And it's just not a time to feel like you have to be forced to go back, because if you turn this job down, it means you're not going to get the next call. That's not the time we live in at this point, I don't think. I hope.
So your new best friend is Google Forms, I
Oh
take
my
it.
gosh, it is totally Google Forms. We've used it for ordering lunches every day on prep. We've used it for our self-health questionnaire. We used it as our anonymous reporting because you can immediately get it pinged to whoever you want. My niece, 13-year-old, they use it for school all the time, taught me how to use it. And now it's a staple. And it's great because people can access it from their phone. It doesn't need to be like a strange app. It's very phone friendly for anybody to be able to answer anything that's needed.
That's great. So one of your shoots was on the stage and the other was on location. So can you just briefly run us through your tech scout?
For our location job, we did a partial remote tech scout. My agency director and DP were at home. My locals to Pittsburgh and I were on the ground. It definitely took all day. We did have multiple locations we were going to. It was basically a Zoom style app that we used. It involved more prep on behalf of the DP and the director. They, did their research with Google Maps, trying to see where the sun was, trying to get themselves on the same page before we were all somewhat remote. But it went pretty well. I mean, we still left with a few questions that were a little we're going to have to figure it out on the day. But for the most part, we were able to get the bulk of what we needed. And it was sort of a combo director / tech scout, just because we didn't want to expose people more than needed too early on in the project. And the second project was on a studio with Steve. And, we had to space out our prep. We actually did do a tech scout for a studio so that we could figure out how to stagger the crews appropriately, how to keep our numbers down. I mean, our crews were 35 to 45, but both of these jobs initially started trying to be 25 people. And as the town and the city opened up a little bit more, we were able to add a few more people. And because we were then allowed to bring, 2 to 3 agency to set instead of just one, you also needed the additional monitor, you needed the additional VTR guy. So they did grow a little bit more than initially intended.
Great. So on the stage shoot, how did the set creation go and your pre-light go?
It was sort of a weird situation that we actually brought Craven Electric in first. They needed to hang a lot of stuff up in the ceiling. So they came in on a Friday, and then art department worked Saturday. And then we had a small crew that came in Sunday to kind of do final tweaks, and then we shot Monday. So it was definitely more spaced. It was a little unusual just because of the set we were building. And then we had a full wrap day because it involved a lot of re-cleaning of the gear, getting it back on the truck for the vendors. And just also, trying to get people the breaks that they needed to be able to go outside and get some fresh air.
Yeah. So what did you do at call time? Did you stagger your call times? Did you take temperatures? Did you have a safety meeting?
Yeah, we did all of that. We staggered our calls to the best of our ability. With every new call time, we had a new safety meeting. So the first one was clearly the largest. And then even with my client and agency, we had a safety meeting. Everybody before they got to set needed to fill out a self-assessment questionnaire on Google Forms, including the clients, agency, talent, including my union reps that showed up to check up on us. And if you stepped on our set, you filled it out. We, just reviewed where hand washing stations were, where bathrooms were. We did a brief overview of our day. Also, tried to emphasize if you are feeling suffocating in your mask and you need to step away, we'll get somebody to step in and cover you for a moment. Our set medic also, suggested just lifting the bottom of your mask to just get a little burst of fresh air was always helpful. And if you could get through that first hour or so of your day, all of a sudden the mask would sort of go away. The first hour was the worst. Our set medic also walked around all the time with hand sanitizer. He took temperatures randomly throughout the day. He had the list. He would also pass out additional masks or gloves that were needed. And there was definitely something about being able to change your mask out throughout the day or discovering which one worked better for you. I think we had 3 different kinds of masks on set, and then people were also bringing their own. Just comfort levels, breathability, it all varied as to who preferred what.
Great. What did you do for your locations to prep for COVID, like the hand washing station, sanitizing station, or sanitizer, signage? I know you told me the other day you had bucket wipes for all the departments. So how did you like formulate that all around both sets?
Yeah, we had, well, luckily our stage day, we had working, functioning bathrooms that had lots of space. So that sort of took that anxiety away for our locations. We worked with the locations on having crews come in advance to clean them, and then they would come in after us to clean up. Most of our locations we were filming at already had a cleaning company on that they used regularly, so we just scheduled them to work around our crew calls. We purchased those automatic soap dispensers that total home use, but you could fill them with hand sanitizer. Worked really well with hand sanitizer that we got from a local distillery, just because it's super thin, so it just squirted out everywhere and quickly dried. So that was one of our staples. We had, I think, 4 to 6 of them around set. We, worked to try and find enough spots for monitors so everybody could be spaced out, be as socially distant as we possibly could. Crafty kind of set herself up in all these locations as like a concession stand. You pointed, she handed. We also did the reusable water bottles, so it was less trash for locations and PAs to be worried about picking up. And then she would refill at her station and hand it back to you, and then she was constantly wiping down.
Got it. So you touched a little bit on your COVID supervisor or your medic. So who was that person?
It was a set medic. We lucked out that our set medic also had, I think, 10 years of being a medical nurse. So very used to PPE, very used to being in situations like this, and had 100% had the right attitude. When we sent out that initial email, we put his information on it as well. He said at any point he was happy to answer anybody's questions if they had concerns. And he was encouraging about, seeing that somebody was sort of getting to that point where he's like, you should just go walk away for a second and, fluff your mask or whatever you need to do. He was also not one to just sit around. He was helping us pass out waters, making sure the crew was restocked. He would take the water bottles to Crafty if needed, if they had their own. And it just helped keep, I think, the right morale on set that, we're all just learning our way as we're going.
Yeah.
He was great.
Mm-hmm. And did your AD schedule in breaks for the crew?
Yeah, we did. We would try and do at least like a 5-minute, sometimes it needed to be a little bit longer, break every 2 to 3 hours, just because there's always people that can't leave set. And you needed to. I mean, you wanted them to be able to actually wash their hands. Hand sanitizer is great, but actually washing your hands is a completely different story. And to be able to use the restrooms. And then also to just be able to walk away and actually get a breather for a few minutes, especially when we were on the stage. We were using a little bit of atmosphere, so it was important to really be able to let people take a moment and rejuvenate. And it really rejuvenated the whole crew. I don't really feel like it was long enough that it caused a delay where somebody was feeling like, oh, we just lost all our momentum. I think it had the opposite effect. That's
great. So you touched a little bit on craft service. So how did craft service and lunch go?
They went well. We sent out a Google form. It was almost 48 hours in advance of our shoot for everybody to pre-order their lunch. It was great because you can make Google Forms go directly into an Excel doc, which you can forward directly to your caterer. So there's no questions about who was what. Our caterer pre-labeled everybody's meal with their name. And then our craft service person and one PA brought them in. They kind of sorted them by department. So when we would break for lunch, it was 2 to 3 people at a time, depending on the space, to kind of go find your meal and then take it to some seating that we had arranged that was spread out. Crafty did all prepackaged things. She found a couple of bakeries and places that prepackaged individual cookies, so there was still a little bit of homemadeness to it. She also did some small like veggie cups with peanut butter in them that she had made at home where she could be sterile and bring to set. But it was really, you know, I want this, or this is the list of drinks that are in the cooler that only she had. You asked for your Coca-Cola and she gave it to you.
Nice, nice. Steve and Amy, anything that, you know, like through shooting that you want to add?
I would just say in hindsight, I applaud Amy for her proactiveness. I think that went a long way to make the crew feel extremely comfortable that we were thinking about everything. We can't think about every single thing, but we thought of a lot of things, and kudos to Amy and her production team for that. I guess in hindsight, some certain costs that are definite, we didn't have to do live streaming on our set, but we certainly had at least 6 or 7 monitors, I believe, when all was said and done, just so people could spread out. I think on a personal level, that the only real infractions we saw were people just not getting the personal space thing and the 6 feet thing in terms of wanting to take a look at a monitor and someone coming right up next to you. And that's just the thing I think everybody sees in their personal life is all our friends and family. Everyone has a different level of sensitivity to COVID safety. And it's just about everyone coming to work with a collaborative nature. You know, I think it's the people on the fringe that don't care as much as we do. And then the people that are just paralyzed with fear. I kind of feel like we got to find that middle ground of collaborativeness for everybody. But yes, knock on wood, it went well, and I credit Amy for that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Amy, can you talk about digital paperwork, especially time cards?
If I could do a whole seminar on this. My whole wrap is 1 plastic envelope of petty cash receipts, which I am in love with. Getting there was very difficult. You know, we asked people to print their schedules at home, print their call sheets at home. We printed a few because you always need a few. But the amount of paperwork that went down was immense. But we happened to use 2 different payroll companies, which I had a lot of the same crew members purposely on both jobs, so it was less exposure. They, I think, hated me in the end because they had to sign up for 2 different digital systems. Hopefully they're all signed up for you guys in the future. But it was a fight. I mean, both of the payroll services that I use all the time and love sort of have it worked out, but not quite. So there's just a large learning curve and a hurdle that it was involved in trying to get the time cards to payroll in time and get them processed. But, you know, the only other thing I can say is I feel like if at the end of your shoot day, if it didn't take longer than your shoot day did 6 months ago, we're probably not doing something right. Like, everybody needs a little time to wipe stuff down. And if you blew through your shoot day just as quickly, or it wasn't annoying because you had to keep reminding people that like only props are coming onto set right now to adjust this, or I only need 2 electrics, I don't need the grip department at the moment. You know, it just feels like you weren't doing what you could to be proactive about keeping everybody spaced apart.
Yeah. Well, I think the whole digital paperwork should have been worked out years ago, and it
Yeah.
has, but now this is really making it happen. So,
Yeah.
but it really sounds like you made everyone feel cared for and created a level of comfort and trust. Well done.
Thank you.
Well done. Hi, Mo. Is your volume up? Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I'm good. Morning.
So the last time I saw you, we were in Miami at the Super Bowl. And for those of you that don't know, Moira production managed, in my opinion, the best TV commercial of the year. The NFL 100's Take It to the House Kid. Boy, things have changed since February, haven't they?
Yeah.
So you just finished a shoot in New York City, and now you're prepping in LA. So please tell us what you've been up to.
You know, most of what Amy was saying was my experience. Obviously, I mean, I've worked in New York a long time, but obviously there's a little bit of more nervousness there. I had guys, you know, first time working, super nervous. And, you know, a lot of what I did is very similar to what Amy did. You try and give them as much information as possible, but you don't know if they read it.
Right.
You know, they're, you know, one person's referencing the white paper and, you know, but we've been told to really just give the crew the documents from the AICP. So I think especially in New York, I don't know, maybe in Pittsburgh too, you have to be really careful with what you give those guys because they'll send it right to the union. So, and as you know, Amy, if you work in New York, I mean, 52 guys are they're pretty tough on commercials. So Kerry's laughing. So, you know, I had to be really careful, and I've worked with these guys for a long time, but I knew they were nervous. I knew there were guys that were in the DGA Zoom calls. They were, you know, it was a lot. They were asking a ton of questions, but we shot at a house. You can't shoot in Manhattan right now. You have to be under 10 in Manhattan. So we went to Mamaroneck, New York, which is in Westchester County. But on the Tech Scout, we scouted 3 houses because we weren't sure which permit was going to go through. So, you know, we scouted in Montclair, which in New York you shoot a lot because it's easy to have nice houses. And we were shooting exterior only. In the end, we went to Mamaroneck, and I'll be quick. We had to permit 2 houses because we were over the 25-person count. So we permitted the driveway next door, the house next door. So it's double the permit cost. And had to permit where you normally have, you know, a parking lot and shuttle the crew. Well, we've got parking on the street. So everybody parked on the street. So, and they charge us like per car in this particular city. So some of that stuff was different than I normally do. And also in New York, everybody doesn't drive. So you have to navigate. One person didn't have a car, which is astonishing. Even the actors had a car. So you have to make sure, you know, one person per row. That was what I had to ask them what they were comfortable with. So I had to get, you know, you have to get one guy to set, you know, and PPE the whole time, et cetera, et cetera. And yes, the Tech Scout took all day. We did a live Tech Scout. So we used a company called Pure Sets, which is based in LA. They supply a compliance officer. The one they have in New York happens to be an RN and a 52 RN. And she was fantastic, super nice demeanor, very informative. And then they have a company they supply with the electrostatic machine, which we had on set. So again, as Amy said, so much emailing, so much more information, so much more logistical stuff to think about for everything. So when we got there and the equipment is different in New York. It's one company and it comes on the truck. It's not owned by the gripper gaffer. So they had disinfected everything. And they also, their shop had been closed for 3 months, so nobody had touched the gear. But again, same as Amy, we had hand washing station, sanitizing, safety meeting where the RN, where the COVID compliance person spoke and the AD. But with the guys there, they want a little bit more specifics. Like, I want to take my mask off. You know, how many feet do I have to be offset? So they're just a little bit more literal in New York. And so she said, okay, 40 feet, go offset, go to your car if you need a break. You know, going forward, I would say we'd schedule in breaks. We didn't do that. But we were also outside, and it's, you know, Pittsburgh, it's humid. I mean, it was, and we had a downpour on our shoot, an absolute 3-hour downpour. So, you know, all in all, there's definitely stuff I learned. I actually had a caterer. They had plexi. I limited the menu. I got some feedback on that. They said that people didn't social distance when they were in line. I got a lot of feedback after my shoot. Those guys love to send a manifesto about everything that could be improved upon. So I learned a lot from that. I also felt like most of what they were addressing were stuff that should have been addressed on set. It sounded like, Amy, on your shoot, you addressed stuff on the shoot day. People didn't wait to address it after the shoot was done. You know,
We
like
tried.
one person said, well, we should have had another monitor, you know, for us to look over the DP's shoulder. Well, all they had to do was ask for it. And funny enough, we have the same DP as on your job. Andy did my job in New York, Andy Lillian. So it's stuff like that, like craft service. I did something different. I probably wouldn't do it again because I noticed that someone on the crew posted on Facebook, and then it was starting to get a lot of comments. I asked him to take it down, but I'm going to do it differently on my stage shoot. I'm going to try it. There's LA, you have a lot more ways to, you know, handle the catering and stuff. It's just a lot more vendors here. So, but, you know, I think it went well. I mean, it's definitely a learning curve. And I sent, you know, an intro email. I actually saw the one that Steve sent because I live in Baltimore too. So Steve forwarded or Caprice did. So I kept a lot of your paperwork and your stuff. So, and you try and give them as much information as you can. This is how we're gonna do this. We had a tent where they could go in the morning. Everybody had done the questionnaire the night before. We had a checklist of who filled it out. She took their temperature. You know, I think in hindsight, I would be more, I would tell the COVID compliance person to ask to see the person's PPE because she made a recommendation about the mask. And then the guys in New York are like, thought that that's a mandate. You know, that's the line you have to walk with union crew, and especially in New York, I think, just because they're a bit harder on you there. So the COVID compliance person walked around with a bag, tried to get the social distancing. I had, you know, the cleaning crew were wiping the bathrooms down all day long, hand washing machines, and then they sprayed all the gear in all my trucks before everybody left. Camera gear, grip electric, production supply truck, props. I mean, again, it was exterior, so it wasn't, you know, we didn't have a huge art department.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
you know,
have to literally have to rethink everything now. And it takes time, and pre-production is longer. And yeah, and I like, this is the whole point of this webinar, is sharing information. Steve was very open when I had a conversation with him weeks ago about these documents and stuff. And again, it's just helpful information for everybody. I had a location question for you. Since you were in a neighborhood, how was the neighbors with you bringing all this? How many crew did you have, and how did they feel about bringing people in?
We were about 37. We had to do letters in the neighborhood.
Standard.
We shot on Tuesday. We sent the letters on the weekend. The house we shot at happened to be, you know, a friend of the owner of the production company. So we were thankful for that, but it was definitely a neighborhood, and they were fine. You know, everybody in the neighborhood, nobody's wearing masks. People walking their dogs, nobody wearing masks. So
right.
What are you going to do? But, you know, we asked the owners, like, you know, don't come out of, we took their temperature. We had them do a questionnaire.
Wow.
We asked both owners to not, you know, unless they needed to, you know, they were going to their car, don't come out and talk to the crew. Don't come out and hang out on set. You know, standard stuff, but, you know, still people are curious. So, you know, it's, again, like, New York, because it can be challenging. And so I thought all in all, it went well. I know a lot of the crew guys have shared that they went well. They sent comments. I will take those into consideration moving forward. Most of this, you know, the COVID, the Pure Sets was really good. I'm going to use them on my shoot out in LA, which is the stage shoot. And the woman they have in New York is, again, you know, she's an RM, informative. There was questions about, you know, a lot of medical stuff. But the thing with commercials, it's really, you know, you have to just, again, be really careful about what you're sharing, what paperwork, because, you know, the DGA has like, well, this is our, you know, our, guidelines, but that hasn't been approved by the AICP, so it's not really an official document. So there's a lot of that happening. Like, the AD on my job here in LA, he's like, well, you can't hand that out because it's not official. And then, then it's all this liability stuff. So I found that I just have to be really careful about how you answer questions. And, I don't know, Amy, if it came up in your shoot, if someone asked, like, what happens if the temperature is too high? What happens to the crew person? Is the shoot shut down, or is the person sent away, or did they tell you how to handle that? Because I don't know. I haven't been given a guideline of how to handle that. Because I know there's a shoot in LA, they shut down for a week because somebody came to set with a fever. So I don't know sorry, we're going into another direction, Caprice, but I'm just wondering if Amy had a guideline for that.
Yeah, so I actually, my shoot was union as well, and my local Philly crew is usually 52, so I'm very familiar with everything you're speaking of. Yeah, but I didn't have any 52 members on my job. They were all from the Pittsburgh area.
Because Pittsburgh's different. Yeah. Thankfully.
But I had reached out in early May when it seemed like the shoot was re-gearing up to all of the unions and said, I have a shoot. Can I even do it? Because at that point, nobody was talking about anything yet. So I had actually forwarded my email and the attachments I was planning to send to each crew member to each union, to their business rep. So they saw in advance of their crew members. And just tried to also be as open with them as I could. Like, they want to protect their members. I wanted to do the same. And because I've had a lot of past experiences on something as simple as there was no tent over Crafty and getting a union phone call about it 6 hours later, I was trying to address that at the very beginning. Like, yes, you can call your union rep. You have every right to call your union rep. But if you can just tell me, I can fix it so much faster. And I don't want it to be something that's potentially an infectious issue that we didn't fix because we didn't know about. So that was sort of my trying to nip that in the bud as quickly as I could. We had also talked to the union reps that if somebody's temperature read too high, they would be asked to sit down and take a break for a few minutes because it is summer, people are working, your temperature goes up. If, after a 5-minute break, they'd get their temperature read again. If it was too high, they'd be asked to go seek medical help. There was no discussion as to if we would have to shut down. We luckily did not have that scenario on our set. But that was the one thing that we had said, it's sort of like you get 2 strikes and you're out rule before you're going to be asked to leave.
I mean, I did, 52, of course. I mean, we sent them a list. We sent the paperwork that we were going to hand out. So with the other unions in New York, I don't worry as much, but I sent it to them, never heard anything. I don't know. I'm sure that the guys have reported back. Yeah, thankfully we didn't have anybody who was ill. And I think, they're like a little coffee, old ladies group in New York. I know I was staying with a friend. She was also shooting for the first time. She was doing a stage shoot. So, we sort of compared notes and going forward, there's lots of PPE in New York. The production supply vendor had tons of stuff. I was surprised because, but again, like I had people say, well, you didn't have masks. I mean, I had tons of masks. It's just, I don't know if people are not used to being proactive or, kind of addressing stuff. Like somebody complained that the Teamster's mask was down. Well, you got to go up and tell him to put his mask on. The producer did it, but that was a complaint. Like, then go to the captain and say, hey, so I think people maybe aren't comfortable with that face-to-face interaction, but like, in order for us to all protect each other, we have to self-police and speak up. And I think people, like Steve kind of said, people were still uncomfortable with that. And I'll put more of an emphasis on it here because I think that can help all of us and the AD and you can put all the pieces in place, but if we're not you know, calling out each other, like, you know, what's the point of having all of it? You can have 20 hand washing stations, but if you're standing next to a guy all day, it's pointless. So, you know, I think that's the main thing. And I said that in an email. Listen, we have to be proactive with each other. You know, the social distancing, and, you know, yet it's just hard because you've got muscle memory and you just, you know, I had a motorhome. I didn't let anybody in. I let the actress in, the hair and makeup person, my coordinator, and me. And I let, you know, usually people are coming in and out all day. Right. I didn't let anybody in. They wanted to talk to me, I stepped out.
Right.
So I think that kind of, I made that kind of a quarantine space because the actress wasn't wearing a mask when she's in there. And we only had one, we had one actress. So just kind of little stuff that's going to be different every shoot that you do. You know, there's not we're not going to the same stage for 5 months. It's going to be a different format like you did with the stage in a location. So you actually have the experience in both places now. So.
Right.
I might just add from what Moira was saying, just the collaborative nature of everything. I mean, we all are aware and maybe need to remind each other that a virus is still out there. There still is not a treatment for it. Well, there's treatment for it. There's still not a vaccine. So as individuals, whether you're on the production side or the union side, we are all willingly stepping outside our doors and entering the workplace. So with that comes some personal responsibility, and production will do everything that we can in our power to make an environment. But if you're paralyzed with fear to re-enter the workplace, it's probably not time to re-enter the workplace. And you might just want to self-evaluate whether or not you're ready. And unfortunately, well, fortunately, there are some federal government subsidies that can help you stay unemployed, but we certainly don't want people leaving their home if they're not ready to, for sure.
Yeah. So thank you. So I don't want to go into a whole lot of testing. I just want to ask both of you guys. So no one got tested. You were just doing right. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that
it never came up either, because I think that's not in the guidelines right now, but
right.
None of the guys, I was surprised. It didn't come up at all on my shoot. I don't know about Amy.
And you, Moira, did have a hygiene crew, and please tell me you didn't have PAs cleaning.
No, wouldn't do it. No, company wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. So this was Pure Sets as the compliance person and a separate cleaning company that comes. And they were there. I mean, I only shot for a day, so it was, but it felt like a 3-day shoot. It was that much more energy and worrying and questions and planning and stuff like that. So
I'm sure it was exhausting. Can you guys talk? I know, Amy, you had like 2 talent per scene. Steve's job had total 2 talent. I'm not sure about the New York job, but how did hair, makeup, and wardrobe go?
For my first shoot, we actually did online Zoom wardrobe fittings, which was, again, a new kind of strange thing. But then it narrowed down exactly what our wardrobe stylist had to shop for, which was only really like 2 particular items. When we were able wardrobe had their own room, makeup had their own room. When all possible, makeup did makeup outside. Better natural light anyway. She was incredibly happy to be outside. They'd put their makeup on, put their mask on, and then the 2 actors would always be separated, sat on opposite sides of the rooms. We'd wait until the last minute to take their masks off just to let the lines from the mask go away. And once it was a kind of an announcement, talents removing their masks so that crew members knew to be more aware of where you were going, that you weren't getting too close to them. They would hide their mask nearby if they could, or, they were always the ones to handle it. So they would put it someplace, and then when they were ready to step off, they'd put their mask back on and step off set.
I mean, mine was very similar. The wardrobe stylist preferred, she just was outside in a tent. She said, I don't need to come in. So hair and makeup, we're in the motorhome with just myself, my assistant driver. No one else came in. And so when the hair and makeup was done, the wardrobe stylist just handed the wardrobe inside. Actress got dressed. She didn't want to come in. And same thing, you know, she walked to set, take her mask off. All the touch-ups were done, you know, social distancing away from the scene. You know, they were, I think having the motorhome as like a quarantine thing is important. It sounds like Amy did that too. Yeah, the wardrobe stylist was pretty nervous, so she was fine to just be under a tent until it started downpouring. So that's a whole other situation.
That scenario has gone through my head so much the last couple of weeks.
3 hours.
Oh, God.
At lunch.
I can understand. So, so just to wrap it up with Mo, before we get to Kerry, looking back, what worked, what didn't, what would you have done differently, and what was your like final takeaway?
There you go.
I think Amy answered that. Go ahead, Mo.
I mean, I learned a lot. I learned a lot from the feedback from the crew, and I just saw what worked. I didn't think a lot of stuff didn't work. The catering and the crafting, you can rethink and do it different ways. I have a different idea for my job on stage. I'm just going to make everybody a little bag of snacks. They pick it up after they check in. That's my crew's smaller on my stage shoot, so that's my idea. I'm going to try this time. You know, again, because the food will always come back to be the main point of contention. Outside of that, it's just communicating and being proactive. The comments I got were more just about the documents and this not being addressed. It was sort of a little bit nitpicky, but it's fine. I'll take it as a learning experience. But I thought the shoot went well. So did the producers. So
great.
New York's going to be tricky though going forward. I think people are pretty nervous there still.
Yeah. So can you still state the harder the job, the more you want it?
I'm not sure. I may just stick to stage shoots for a while. I don't know. We'll have to see. A location shoot is definitely challenging and a lot of work and a lot more legwork, and especially with locations and you know, in New York you don't have a gang boss like you have in California that can help navigate the parking and all that stuff. New York is the location manager does all of it. So I think staffing wise, it's maybe a little bit easier in LA. I hate to say that, but in New York, I think you still have to think through everything as a PM in New York, and I'm sure Amy knows that too in Philly. But I think it's just there's another layer of work for PMs and department heads and stuff to address everything, because stuff comes up that we're not used to thinking about, you know, and people are nervous, and I agree with Steve. Like, if you're too nervous, then like, I get that you want to come back to work, but you know, not at the expense of, you know, thinking apart the production, you know.
And it's okay. It's okay if you're not ready. It's all right. So thank you. So we're going to get some questions. Let's get to Kerry, and then we'll get some questions going. But hi, Kerry.
Hi.
These are truly remote times.
Yeah, and of course my logistics are very different because it's a documentary tiny. So
right, and we have a lot of documentary people that have been in this group and really want some information. So you've been busy for a while we were all in quarantine, and you have. So can you just talk to us a little bit about your remote filming experience? And obviously your locations were predetermined by where your interview subjects were located. So how can we safely shoot with mitigation in each of these locations?
Since everything is very regionally or state or district or town or county or specific, we examined all of our subjects that we had for the stories in May. Our schedule was to be the shoot in June. We decided in mid-May that we were going to try to get something accomplished outside the country, because we felt like that was maybe, since one of our subjects was in Tel Aviv. She's an American citizen, but had gone there on a hostel gap year. Her parents in Brooklyn encouraged her to consider staying where she was. And then of course things happen where you pretty much might be where you are. And in any event, that seemed a very safe bet for us because Israel was certainly less populated, a less dense country, and they had a huge jump on the virus. And we were aiming for May 22nd, and that was, they had just started to reopen everything and they were kind of coming back to life, and we took an opportunity at that window. And we secured our camera operator and sound person in Tel Aviv for a day with 4K, which is what we were filming. We made arrangements for the DP to make certain he had a good, valid internet connection wherever we were conducting the interview, with a laptop adjacent to lens, offset, so that we could do an eyeline match. We took time into consideration for the difference in time. We had him shoot the B-roll early in the morning. By the time that he was ready to go, and we left him to his druthers to the actual interview location. We were not in a position to try to scout. It's a real person. She was at the hostel. We were denied permission from filming there, although he did grab a B-roll before he got yelled at. They did a number of things publicly at the beach and in the markets areas, and then he had a friend who had a friend who had an office, which was empty. And this was literally, you know, the determination day of. He knew exactly what she wanted, which was a prime lens, racked background, give it to me tight. There's a lot of emotion here. And we commenced with a 2-hour interview, wrapped up our day, did an electronic file transfer, which I've decided that I'll never do again, because 4K is the bane of my existence, is going on my tombstone. But anyway, that's another call altogether. We completed our filming there. Just to let everybody know, that was a $1,300 day. Just letting everybody know kind of what our pocket was. That was a camera operator and a sound guy of great repute who had been highly recommended. We'd seen his work in advance. That was wrapped up same day, and then we moved to the next subject, which we had Ohio, we had Illinois, we had Boston, New York, Florida. And we started at that time our next shoot in the state that had Ohio, which was the next one in the pocket of that late May, early June, at the very end of the month prior to Memorial Day. And the guy's on a 560-acre farm. He knew the DP and had recommended him and had worked with him. That was a one-man operation. They did their thing by way of social distance. We did the same thing on our end. And then they did a drone day, which was, of course, very minimal for exposure. Then we did Congressman Joe Walsh, that was Illinois. And in between that, we did a hotel room in Boston. We did a park outside in New York. And the only time the director was present was in one of those instances. Otherwise, it was all done by her virtually.
Right. So you might have touched on this a little bit. With each state and region in various stages of shutdown and reopening, how can you plan and work in each state, and how is it different in each state and their stage that they're in?
It was really important for me to go to the state's websites, whether it was the Film Commission, if it was a large, most states have one. So I start there. I would look at the protocol if there was any in mid-May to late May. I wasn't seeing too much. Of course, that's changed dramatically. I think folks were working and getting geared up for how they were gonna perhaps roll out their web or electronic media or social media. But it was important for me to follow the governor protocol, because really that was what every state was under at that point. There might not have been film protocol, but based on essential work. And of course, you know, I was using one-man operations. They own their own equipment. They took their own liability. When we were in New York, they were very specific about what they wanted. We were fine with that because the director's a New Yorker. She's also a Massachusetts resident in the summer, and therefore our Boston people were much in the same situation. I had a lot of coordinating with hotels. This did not go as I expected. I never got what I wanted, but with a documentary, you make work what you need to make work.
That's right. That's right.
So each state's guidelines by way of where we were and where we were shooting, what was allowed, what wasn't, but it was really that simple to communicate with the subject. Microphones were sanitized, passed off in bags if we did wireless, those were very simple things done with a small crew.
Got it. So what technical needs were beyond the usual?
4K. No. Just making sure that in these certain circumstances, even in shooting at someone's home, which we did outside on a porch, and we were really hopeful that the Wi-Fi signal was going to be conducive to the laptop placement and the distance that was requested by everyone in New York, in Brooklyn. There was a lot of moving of, internal towers and things. We had a very glitchy. I would suggest that on that camera people could benefit in this instance from knowing how to tether their laptop or device, which is, Surface or laptop. Phones are really not conducive for an interview scenario, especially with a socially distanced situation and a lens match. So tethering your phone or your laptop to your data, so if you don't have access to Wi-Fi, is something that everybody should learn.
Good, good. Okay, what workabouts proved financially beneficial? Workarounds?
No travel, no hotels, no rental cars, no per diems, no gas, no tolls.
Okay. And what, since this was a documentary, which challenges were financially challenging, if any?
Well, we're raising money, so that's always a challenge. But in the scheme of dealing with each region and what folks were, a lot of people were willing to make some very good deals to work and to have their gear working because they owned it, and that was helpful. As I said, we saved on a number of elements that we didn't. I have used FedEx more than I'd like to. So with transfer of hard drives, as opposed to trying to do, these enormous data files, any kind of transfer way. And I understand I wasn't like stupid thinking that. I haven't been in the industry for a long time. I used to do what the rest of you all did, got out of that, and now I'm sort of by proxy back in. But I found there to be, to communicate with each individual as you have in your crew, as small or large, and the people that you're working with for talent or your interview subjects. And then in our instance, it was examining what was opening when, what was staging out, what was allowed, what was safe, trying to make sure everybody was comfortable. And it's not a big crowd, and it wasn't a union issue, and there wasn't any insurance questions about liability. People want to go back to work and they want to do that with safeguards, and we encourage that for them and for the people on the opposite end of that. So there was always at least between the subject and the camera operator.
Great. What would be your advice for crew out there regarding remote filming and, frankly, enhancing equipment or purchasing new equipment to keep up with these times?
I mean, again, really, if there is a need for calling in for remote, whether it's your client, your agency, you've shown multiple examples to people, and we've all kind of been looking for information from folks shooting, whether it's Moab at the end of May with 28 people, or whether it's the fine folks here that are really, trying to make things work. I think everybody just has to be, we are all, for the most part, unless I've lost something in my translation, we're all at-will employees. There's no essential workers out there in any capacity that can go to work and say, you have to guarantee me I'm not going to get COVID. It's a real joint effort for everyone to sort of self-police, prepare, provide. And that, to me, is going to be how we go forward. And we're going to go forward and back. Things that were in LA 2 weeks ago are morphing now. And New York's been really, just go team for the Northeast corridor here. I'm sitting in Maryland. We all are right now. Delaware just screwed everything up, and DC's all messed up again. I don't mean any way but this, COVID. I think we all have to be prepared to be fluid. I think we all have to be prepared to say that we're going to take safeguards and know others will, but nobody can guarantee because we don't know this. And there's no insurance company underwriting it, and Aflac's not covering you. I mean, all that is still just out to the wind. And I hope everybody can safely go back to work at some point, but I don't think it's going to be ever the same until there's a vaccination out there. So
Yeah. So thank you. So Patrick, do we have any questions? It looks like I haven't been paying attention to it. That's why I have you. But it looks like maybe there's some action going on. Some questions are asked and answered by Mo, but you want to throw something out to the panel?
Sure. There's a question from Jonathan Zur. I'll just go down the list. I've been going through it. Did anybody in their productions require a COVID testing actually before their shoot? Was that part of the pre-pro?
No.
That's the first question.
No.
No? Okay.
No.
That was, and then nobody, I guess it would be a follow-up from him. None of you guys had anybody sign these liability waivers. I've heard about these things, but I haven't really come across them. Okay.
So the unions are very strict about saying they will not allow their members to sign a liability waiver.
We didn't even present it. We didn't.
No.
I didn't even have it. I'm sure Amy didn't either.
We talked about that on the other webinars too.
Yeah, and there were a couple of questions that were addressed that I redirected because they were addressed on last week's webinar.
Okay.
There were a couple of specific questions from Cindy regarding craft service. Did you put a tent over craft service as like I guess an extra protection, and also how were walkie-talkies handled?
I think the tent thing was about my example of getting a union phone call 7 hours later, which wasn't about a tent. It was about something else. I just couldn't think of a better example. So we did have a tent over Crafty because it was in the sun, but I don't know that that's a union requirement.
It seems like we always put a tent over Crafty.
Yeah. Otherwise your chocolate melts.
Yeah.
But for us, for walkies, we had one person in charge of walkies. We lucked out. There were several of us that would just scour the stores leading up to the job because we had time. So we were able to find rubbing alcohol wipes. The walkie person had 2 canisters of wipes. They would wipe down the walkie in the morning. They would put it on the table as freshly wiped down and space them apart. So as the crew member got their temperature checked, they picked up their walkie, they shouted their walkie number to the PA down the way that was taking down walkie numbers, and they went on their way. She had a big Ziploc bag to collect used bricks in that people would just dump in. She'd go back, wipe down the batteries, charge them, package them up. And then as a battery died, she would hand it to somebody with the wipe. Take your walkie, take your wipe it down, throw it out. You know, it's just a constant flux of wiping.
Yeah.
In mine, the vendor disinfected them. And then, so when I picked them up, they were already pre-bagged, the antenna in them. So we labeled the bag. So we had it like Amy did, laid them out on the table with their name. We picked it up after they had their test done. So I found that worked well, that there wasn't so much wiping. If they need to swap out the battery, no one actually did, but they were told to just come to production. But having them pre-bagged, I think, was helpful. So.
Yeah. Anything else pertinent, Patrick?
Well, this one last thing, a specific question. There were a lot of comments and stuff that are on the chat, but this is one specific question that wasn't addressed. Was how did you deal with the constant cleaning, disinfecting of the honey wagons and bathrooms on location? I mean, I guess while you were filming, or with the specifics of that.
I mean, I had a cleaning company, so I think I answered it in the chat, but the cleaning company sent 2 guys. One guy had the spray, whatever the top spray that you're supposed to have, and then the other guy had the portable electrostatic machine spraying as people requested. But basically, the other guy was basically stationed outside of the bathrooms, constantly wiping them down all day long. So I think that was a big. People were really concerned about that. That worked well for me. There wasn't any complaints about like the bathrooms, but like sometimes in New York, we'd just use the holding space bathrooms, but this time we had to bring them. So it was more of a cost. We had to bring portable bathrooms, which are not easy to find there, but it worked well on and sanitizing stations outside of it and all over set. Amy did the same thing. You can't have enough, but still people are like, I can't find them. I'm like, They're right there. So.
And here's a question from Bob Spoor. A good question regarding props. How did you handle props and collect and distribute them? Personal props too, I guess, like watches and things like that.
We had two actors on set separated by a plexiglass. And this was a production approach we ran by the local SAG rep to the Pittsburgh area. There were some hand props. There was one designated, I think, one prop guy for each of the actor. So they were sanitizing things. I believe the actors were going to share or pass a pair of binoculars, but in the end, we wound up just faking it, and they each had their own pair that matched. So there are workarounds with that. And I also think, at least in the commercial world, I think creative is going to be different. We'll see less actors and less exchange of props in creative that's coming down the pike.
No toga parties.
No.
And this is from Lynn Quinn. How long were your shoot days?
We had a short one, Amy. the
Yeah,
dedicated one.
we stuck with scheduling a 10-hour day from crew call to camera wrap as recommended. And, you know, we had to, especially with that first job, you know, the clients, everybody worked on getting the creative down. So it was something we felt like we could accomplish in that 10-hour period. And I think our first day, we wrapped within 10 hours. I think maybe it was 10 and a half with a little bit of wrap out and extra cleaning for some departments, but we were able to make it within a 10 and have you know, we had a 12-hour turnaround. Like, wanted people to be able to go home and get some sleep before they came back.
I mean, we did the same thing. I think, you know, ours was a 10, and I think one department had a half hour, and I think it was because of the you know, the cleaning.
Mm.
So that's something going forward you have to consider, along with the breaks.
Yeah.
We didn't schedule breaks, but now I think going forward it's going to be, you know, I think it's going to become a little bit more standard.
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that we have to innovate, but we are such a creative industry, and everyone's willingness to share information and be transparent will do it. So wow, what a lot of great information. Thank you everyone for your time, your expertise, your willingness to share your experience and to be transparent. I know this all feels so daunting, and you are not alone. This is why I wanted to start these initiatives, so we can figure it out together. Thanks to everyone for joining in this week.
Thanks, Caprice.
Thanks, Caprice.
Everybody, thanks, Caprice.
Everybody, thanks, Pat.
Thank you.